Isn't that a crazy sound? I'm going to start and end the show with that kookaburra, a bird from Tasmania. I took that audio at the Deep Ecology workshop in Hobart, Tasmania, that I'm going to be talking about today. And you'll also hear me sometimes playing a little ringing bell around John Seed's poems that he's going to read. That bell was the bell that my guest, Tema Milstein, would ring when it was time for us to get back inside for our Deep Ecology workshop, which is the topic for today's show. Hello, human animal earthlings. It's great to have you joining us on Radio Free Georgia's In Tune to Nature program. I'm host Carrie Freeman, coming to you in Atlanta in August of 2025. And today we're going to be talking about a movement and an eco-philosophy called Deep Ecology, encouraging our human societies to live in alignment and deep connection with nature and other animals. To tell us about deep ecology and the workshops, activism, and events like the Council of All Beings that they conduct are my guests John Seed and Tema Milstein, friends I hung out with in Tasmania this summer as I participated in their deep ecology workshop, and want to talk on this show about some of the compelling exercises we did, as some of you listening could potentially do these exercises with other folks in your community. So if you want to hear about the green movement down under from these global activists and get some natural inspiration, poetry, and ecotherapy, this is the show for you. Just a bit about my guests. John Seed has dedicated his life to protection of the rainforests and their biodiversity in Australia and worldwide since 1979. He's a co-author of the influential book Thinking Like a Mountain Toward a Council of All Beings, now in 12 languages. John's the founder of the Rainforest Information Centre and was awarded the Order of Australia Medal by the Australian government for services to conservation and the environment. That was 30 years ago, and his inspirational service continues to this day. His website is johnseed.net. My other guest, his friend and mine, Dr. Tema Milstein, is a leading American environmental communication scholar from New Mexico who is now living in Sydney, Australia, working as a fabulous professor at the University of New South Wales. Tema is a former Fulbright Scholar who studied whale ecotourism and the co-editor of award-winning books on ecocultural identities and teaching environmental communication. Welcome, John and Tema.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yeah, first tell us where you're both located and whose traditional lands you're on, because you might be in two different cities. I'm actually not sure. John, do you want to tell us where you're calling in from?
Um, I'm about an hour north of Tema on the central coast of New South Wales, and I'm on unceded Aboriginal territory that's been occupied for 60,000 years. However, it's contested, and I'm not going to weigh in on whose territory I
Oh,
think it is.
I see. How about you, Tema?
I'm on Bidjigal land down here in kind of the south end of Sydney on the coast. I do want to pay my respect to ancestors past, present, and emerging, and just my deep appreciation for all the custodianship that's been happening for tens of thousands of years. I also, you'd mentioned the wildlife. I want
Yeah.
to acknowledge that the wattle is in bloom right now, which
Oh,
signifies that the fish are running and spring is coming. I also want to pay my respects to the enormous paperbark tree I can see
ooh.
out my window and the rainbow lorikeets that are feeding on the blossoms, and also to the what I suspect is the red-bellied black snake who is in my chook or my chicken pen right now, which is why the chickens are not coming out into their run.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And I
because
hope
they're
that
kind of
everyone can be in
scared, I would
peace
imagine.
right now. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of exciting at your house. Yeah. Well, Tema, I've known you for about 20 years, I think, because we see each other every 2 years or so at the Conference on Communication and Environment, because we're part of a smaller group of us who focus on animal issues. And so I always enjoy seeing you. And you did an excellent job, by the way, along with others, organizing the Environmental Communication Conference we just attended this June in Hobart, Tasmania. Listeners probably recall my two Tasmanian wildlife podcasts that I had in July as part of that wonderful experience. But Tema, how did you get the idea to reach out to John Seed and organize the post-conference workshop on deep ecology that I attended, which is where I got to meet John?
Yeah, so I guess this story is really about how did I learn about John and the deep ecology movement, and then how did we meet each other
Yeah.
more recently. So when I was doing my PhD back in the United States in Seattle, Washington, I was really looking for what were the transformative philosophies and practices that were happening around ecological identity. And that's when I immediately stumbled pre-internet, I guess, or just I guess it was early internet. But in the library, if you wandered around, you found mention of deep ecology, and so I learned about John's work with Arne Ness and with Joanna Macy then, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I included it in my own literature reviews, but I thought I'd never get a chance to go to a deep ecology workshop or a council of all beings. That just sounds amazing. I want to know more, but I don't live close to those folks. So when I moved to Australia, which was about 7 years ago, still didn't realize that John was here. And but I heard about an eco village that was kind of early days, a couple hour or two north of Sydney, and I brought my family up there for an Extinction Rebellion event, actually. And John was there. And I'm like,
Yay.
the John Seed? And so we started up a friendship. He was offering workshops again some years later. And so I grabbed about a dozen of my students from the University of New South Wales, and we came up to do a workshop, and everyone was blown away. And so that started a nice friendship. And ever since, I've been co-facilitating the deep ecology workshops with John. And then when the Conference on Communication and Environment, I was the chair of that down here the first time it was off, happened in the Southern Hemisphere. And John and I started scheming as we do, or co-conspiring, as we've been saying, and thought, oh, how amazing would it be to have, a workshop as part of this conference for people who, are academics, researchers, practitioners, activists, artists from around the world to take part in this together. And just one of the richest experiences I've had.
Yeah, it really was wonderful. And John, how did you come to describe yourself as a deep ecologist or incorporate those principles into your forest protection activism?
In the early 1980s, about 1982, I'd been working very hard on forest activism, and we'd had tremendous successes in Australia. It's hard to imagine these days that such a thing is possible, but in New South Wales, uh, we'd been able to protect a string of rainforests in national parks in 1981, and then in Tasmania, a
Mm.
huge area in the southwest wilderness, the temperate rainforest, and then later in far north Queensland, the tropical rainforest. The time was clearly ripe, and there was tremendous support for it. But it was clear that for every forest that had been protected worldwide during those years, 1,000 forests had been lost.
Mm.
And clearly there was no way to save the planet one forest at a time. That these were our life support systems, and they were disappearing. And all the things that had been achieved in Australia and elsewhere weren't anywhere near enough to make a difference as far as the sixth mass extinction was concerned, which we were clearly embarked upon. And so, in trying to understand the psychological dimension that allows human beings to behave in such a self-defeating manner, um, Paul Ehrlich said, "We are sawing off the branch that we're sitting on." You
Mm.
know, and how crazy is that, and why are we so crazy? And I came upon the philosophy of deep ecology, where for the first time I felt that someone was answering my questions in a way that satisfied me. And so ever since then, I've continued to be very involved in forest protection and reforestation and protecting landscapes of other kinds of biomes. But I've included deep ecology and facilitating deep ecology workshops in everything that I do.
Now, John, before I ask you more about the deep ecology workshops, how would you describe deep ecology to people who've never heard of this philosophy? Like, what does it mean to you?
Well, the term was coined by the late Arne Nests, Emeritus Professor of Philosophy at Oslo University. And according to him, underlying all of the symptoms of the environmental crisis is the illusion of separation between human beings and the rest of the natural world. And this illusion of separation, he said, was the result of anthropocentrism or human-centeredness, the idea that human beings are the center of everything. So this anthropocentric viewpoint, which totally, what shall I say, corrupts every modern society and has roots that go thousands of years back into our story. It goes back at least as far as the Old Testament, where we learn that man is to subdue and dominate nature, and nature is to be in fear and trembling of us.
Mm.
And as a result, Arnie said that we have lost a sense of who we truly are, that our ecological identity has become invisible to us. He said that ecological ideas won't save us. We're not going to be able to think our way out of the mess. What we need is ecological identity or ecological self. And he called for people to construct what he called community therapies to nourish this ecological identity, to free us from the tyranny of our merely social identity, our ego. And some years later, I met Joanna Macy, and she and I began the work of constructing these community therapies, which we now call deep ecology workshops. In America, they're often called the work that reconnects.
Nice. And at the workshop, you often recited a lot of poetry, so I wanted to ask you if you have a poem that helps express deep ecology values.
Yeah, well, I feel that deep ecology is much more clearly understood through poetry and music than more prosaic expression. And one of the heroes and ancestors of the environmental movement is the wonderful California poet, the late Robinson Jeffers. And um, so I'd like to share a poem called The Brown Forest, which I think speaks to this question of what is ecological identity. I entered the life of the brown forest, the great life of the ancient peaks, the patience of stone. I felt the changes in the veins in the throat of the mountain, and I was the stream draining the mountain wood, and I the stag drinking, and I was the stars, boiling with light, wandering alone, each one lord of his own summit. And I was the darkness outside the stars. I contained them. They were part of me. I was mankind also, a moving lichen on the cheek of the round stone. They have not made words for it. To go beyond things, beyond ages and hours, and be all things in all time, in the motionless and timeless centre, in the white of the fire. How can I express the excellence I have found? Robinson Jeffers.
Wow, I love that. So beautiful. Thank you. And I was really resonating with what you were saying, how this deep ecology is part of our identity, because I often explain deep ecology as being deep green at heart and in practice, not light green, like hence the word deep. So deep green is more than just recycling. Like to be a deep ecologist is more of a mindset of myself as a fellow earthling who should seek to coexist with others on this shared planet. And Tema, how do you explain deep ecology to people who haven't heard of it?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Carrie. And one of the terms that Joanna Macy has used is the encompassing self. This notion that we are not this, humans on one side, everything else living and non-living on
Yeah.
the other, but that we are encompassed and encompassing of all of it, and all, not just humans, all the parts, we're just one part. So it's this expansive sense of your ecological selfhood. And I think the other thing that people often don't get right away is that it's not just a philosophy, it's also a culturally transformative practice.
Mm.
So that, and when I mean culturally transformative, I'm talking about westernized, industrialized cultures getting into transformation within those spaces within which anthropocentrism, as John just explained, has reigned for, at least a couple thousand years. And and transforming, doing a massive kind of communal paradigm shift
Yeah.
from anthropocentrism to ecocentrism. And I think for people who, aren't lucky like I am, who live near John Seed, you can read about this and learn a lot more, but they're also part of the transformative practice is workshops that people are doing all over the world. And I think the other thing I'd want to say is that it's not the only way to be, deep green, but it's one
Right.
living collective way of doing this that has been established for some time. And is, when I say living, it's also quite open. It's open access. It's growing. People are constantly shaping it. John is always encouraging people to just step in and make it their own. And the other thing I share is that about the Council of All Beings. I don't know if we're going to talk about that
Oh,
later,
yeah,
but
we are. Yeah.
okay, good. When I heard of that, and then I learned about the other exercises that exist and continue to sprout out, just the name the Council of All Beings gets you interested, right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of imagine, oh wait, it's paradigm shifting in itself just to hear that phrase.
Yeah, I love the concept of the paradigm shift. I think that's really important in the action-oriented part of it. My own sense of deep ecology comes from the philosopher Arne Ness, as you mentioned, John, and then the authors Duvall and Sessions, who came up with some guiding ethical principles of deep ecology that focus on the intrinsic value of nature and biodiversity. So not just viewing other species as a utility to us humans, outlining the environmental problems with human overpopulation and overconsumption, and our need to live more simply and enjoy a quality lifestyle by doing more with less, including reducing human population growth. And I have my students discuss each of these guiding principles, and it's very provocative discussion, especially like if we're talking about reducing nature's diversity and richness only if it's serving our vital needs, but not to serve luxuries, or even just the controversy of, not growing the human population more. But to even question that we should not just live a life of luxury and excess if we've financially earned it seems kind of sacrilegious in American and probably Australian Western cultures, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's just putting those simple principles down that we have no right to reduce this richness except to fulfill our vital needs. Just even having a discussion about what is our vital needs versus our luxuries and wants. And I'm not saying I don't have plenty of luxuries and not just vital needs. So, but that's I like having that discussion, which we rarely have, and it's almost like not even politically allowed in the United States. So I think these principles are useful to have. But I also thought when I was participating in the workshop, it wasn't like about these principles per se. I found it was more like group ecotherapy, like tears and laughter and community building, broadening our perspectives of our humble place in the universe. And so the workshop really affects people emotionally, and that part really exceeded my expectations. John, what is the goal behind this approach of hosting workshops as environmental activism?
The ideas of deep ecology obsessed me for years, but it was only when I met Joanna Macy in 1985, 3 years after I met deep ecology, that I found the incredible spiritual technology that she had mastered for deep personal change. I went to one of her workshops, which was called Despair and Empowerment. And what she promised was that if we honestly expressed our deepest feelings of fear and rage and terror uh, and helplessness in the face of what was happening to our world, that we would not be damaged or crushed or depressed, or nothing bad would happen to us, but that she could create a safe container where we would find ourselves empowered at the end of it. And it was true. And so I realized that if this was brought together with the ideas of deep ecology, we could have perhaps the community therapies that Arnie Ness was calling for. And I excitedly shared this with Joanna, and luckily she agreed, she understood. And so that's within a week, we'd created the Council of All Beings together as the first of these community therapies. But the essence of her work is that so much of what's wrong with the world is held in place because a huge swathe of our feelings is suppressed, that we live in a culture of denial where there's never an occasion to where our deepest feelings of anguish are welcome, and where people want to hear them, where no one wants to change the subject or make it better or uh, you know um,
Right.
turn away. And that the thing about these feelings is that they're a huge part of our intelligence. That if we look at the ancestors stretching back to the beginning of life on Earth, so 4,000 million years, every single one of our ancestors has been intelligent enough to reach the age of reproducing itself before it was consumed, without exception. And 99.99, etc., 99% of that intelligence preceded cognition.
Mm.
So what we call feelings is what remains in us of this ancient intelligence which has stood the test of time, which has allowed each of our ancestors to make good decisions about when to flee and when to fight and when to be still. And so suppressing these, we suppress our intelligence. So our cognition is very beautiful, but it's recent, and the consequences are yet to be clear. And what we can say about it is that in the absence of the passion that these feelings bring, our cognition is sterile. I used to think that what we needed to do was raise awareness. Once everyone understood what was
Yes.
going on, it'd be okay. Wrong. Everyone understands. We feel paralyzed, we feel helpless, we feel hopeless. And so these workshops allow us to begin to re-invite that passion back. And so it kind of frees us from that paralysis. And one of the outcomes of the workshops is that many people find themselves able to sort of throw themselves much more wholeheartedly into whatever it is that they're interested in, as far as protecting the world or making things better or creating the new systems that all of us can see that we need.
Yeah, and I want to talk about a lot of the exercises that we do in these workshops. And like we're going to get later into that kind of circle honoring our pain, which is kind of that anguish that you were talking about. But let's get back to something that both you and Tema mentioned, which is the Council of All Beings, because I think that might have been a bit of a starting point because you had co-authored the book Think Like a Mountain that dealt with the Council of All Beings. Can you describe what that is?
The Council of All Beings, the first of the experiential deep ecology exercises, um, we each find an ally from the non-human world, a plant or an animal or a landscape feature or the Milky Way or a drop of water. And then we make a mask to represent that ally. We only have 15 minutes, a paper plate, cut a couple of eye holes, a few crayons, string, and then we pass through a ceremonial gate, and we try to leave our humanness behind, and we gather in council to speak in the first person for our ally. I am mycorrhizae, and And we don't have to believe anything. We don't have to believe this really is the spirit of koala or anything like that. It could be, um, you know, some kind of theater of moral imagination. It doesn't matter. Just get into a childlike space and wait until suddenly you find yourself saying something. And
Yeah.
we are always shocked at what we hear. That no Council of All Beings has ever been the same as it. Like I've done hundreds, and they're never the same twice. We always hear things that we've never heard before.
Yeah. Because it's
Tema?
not like a parliament where you're like, and next on the agenda, it's very open and it's just like whoever wants to say anything. And I like how you mentioned that um there's a playful kind of energy to it as well because of the masks. Because Timma, you didn't give us much time to do this mask, and I mean, ours looked they look kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, I was impressed with what we could do in such a short amount of time. Like, and I was a pig, and that was kind of easy. That's an easy mask. But people were like mushrooms in the wind, and like there was all these really creative masks. But yeah, and Timma, you were actually, I think, the one that was kind of facilitating our council that I was in when I was the pig. Yeah, what's been your experience with the way it goes? I remember you liked or you thought it was we had a really good council, our one in
Yeah,
Tasmania.
it was an awesome council of all beings. It's interesting as you said, Tema, you were. I was like, what was I? I was a rock that time, a really beautiful rock that I had seen when I walked out of the beautiful spot we were on the mountain in Hobart, Tasmania. I think just a couple of things I'd want to add for to help it that people really have a full picture of what how this works and can they do it, which you can. And John, I'm sure will mention that instructions are up online and available to folks. One thing that I think that is important, right? What John talks about the allies that people come to represent, the non-human, the more than human allies, is telling people ask for permission from this ally and then listen to the response, because I think that's the first step where people, because most of us who are in these westernized industrialized cultures don't are never told to ask permission from anything that's not human,
Right.
and never told to listen. So I think that's kind of the first step into the Council of All Beings, is to get that instruction and know that everyone's following it, and then to try it and see what it feels like. When I first went to my Council of All Beings with John, and he said, there aren't humans here, and when humans have turned up, they kind of ruin it. In the Council of All Beings, they want to be the center of attention. One of the things also that I think has been really helpful is in the very little instruction that one does give in the Council of All Beings, is to say this isn't about humans. Because what I have noticed that when we don't say that, that all the beings there tend to focus on the humans nonetheless, and to gripe about them, or to be
I
upset about
still
them.
did a little bit of that as a pig. I just can't help it.
Yeah, but
Couldn't.
it is this opportunity to not be anthropocentric, right? And I mean, truly not be. And so I think it's a great exercise in doing that. And you mentioned the masks, and something that's really interesting about that, right? Is it just paper plates? When I saw
Yeah.
that it was just paper plates and
And some
markers,
crayons
I
and like a
thought, yeah,
string. I was like, we were all like flustered, like running around, like, oh my God, can I have this marker? And just, I
exactly.
really
It
hadn't
doesn't
done
take
something like
much.
that in like a long time.
It
Yeah.
felt good, right? And
Yeah,
you're
it
like, I want
was.
more time to do this. Exactly. So getting into that creative spot and with others and in quietness too, is really helpful. And one of the things, I don't know if I added this, John, or if I saw that someone had put it there before, but the idea that when you come out of the Council of All Beings, you take off the mask of your ally, and you'll be wearing the mask of being a human,
Mm.
when you come out, I think is also really useful to help us remember that our humanness is temporary, is and constructed, is co-constructed, what it means to be a human. And so to kind of think of this as a construction paper, whatever that we're wearing for now, I think also starts to disintegrate the boundaries that we have constructed around ourselves as a species and as individuals.
If you're just joining us on Radio Free Georgia, this is In Tune to Nature, and I'm host Carrie Freeman talking about the ethical philosophy and movement of deep ecology and the workshop exercises that reconnect us with our place in nature. With Australian eco-activist John Seed of the Rainforest Information Centre and Dr. Tema Milstein, Professor of Environmental Communication at University of New South Wales in Sydney. John, one of my favorite exercises from the Deep Ecology workshop that I attended in Tasmania was the one where we gained a sense of humility and spatial perspective by creating a scaled model of our solar system that we walked, starting at our community center building we walked from planet to show the vast space between the pea-sized planets, like the Earth as a chickpea in relation to a melon-sized sun. And then we ended up walking all the way out to Pluto, which happened to be at a waterfall. It was very well positioned in the space that we operated. But John, can you tell us more about that exercise? Because I imagine, you've done it in so many places and like you're physically walking people through the solar system, and it's so much more vast. The spatial aspect of it was really humbling, and then it was also just awesome to get outside.
Just a brief preamble that we found that whenever a circle of people gets together with the shared intention to heal that illusion of separation between ourselves and the more than human world, this amazing spirit enters the group and this incredible upliftment and empowerment takes place. And it's irrespective of what you actually do, that the
Mm.
particular processes that we do, we enjoy them, they work really well, but it's neither here nor there. You could do something different and it would work just as well as long as it was congruent with that intention. And I say that because this exercise that we did, which is called the Earth as Peppercorn, was not created as a deep ecology exercise. It was created by Guy Otwell, who's the professor of astronomy at the University of South Carolina. And in his introduction, he speaks of this process as being, if you want to generate a sense of immense enthusiasm about our solar system, about our galaxy, about the cosmos, whether it's in a kindergarten student or a postgraduate student, there's no better way than this exercise. And that's true. But once we add that intention that brought us together for that weekend, the deep ecology intention, it becomes a tremendous vehicle for nourishing our ecological identity. So first, we share our ignorance about the scale of the solar
Right.
system. And so we ask people to guess, if the Earth was the size of a peppercorn, how big would the sun be? And the guesses, I think I remember they ranged from, some people said maybe the size of an orange, and one person said the size of the Earth. Do you know, like we have no idea about the scale. And the answer is it's about the size of a cantaloupe. And so then where our guy will ask us to guess, okay, if the Earth is a peppercorn and the sun is a cantaloupe, how far would you have to walk in feet or miles to get from the sun to the Earth? And again, a vast range of guesses. And the answer turns out to be 26 meters. And then we start from the sun, and I've got in my pocket all of the different planets. And the largest of the planets is Jupiter, which is, I have a walnut. That's the second largest object after the sun in our solar system. And together we walk to Pluto. I don't tell people beforehand how far we're going to be
Right.
walking, and so it's a little bit of a spoiler, but as it turns out, Pluto is about 1,000 yards, 1,017 yards from the sun. And during that whole long walk where we're talking with each other and
Yeah.
walking through the forest and along this stream and so on, there's nothing bigger than a walnut, and everything else is just a chickpea or a pinhead.
Yeah.
And there's just, so we, at the end of it, we get an incredible sense of like, if the Earth is a peppercorn, what are we? Do you know?
Yeah.
And then once we get to Pluto, I say, okay, so we have walked 5 light hours. It takes light 5 hours to get from Pluto back to the Earth again. And we live in a galaxy. This solar system lives in a galaxy, and that galaxy is 100,000 light years across. And that galaxy is one of 200 billion galaxies in the known universe. And so, but the physical act of walking is really important. That it's interesting enough, like what we're doing, talking about it and a thought experiment, but embodying it,
Yeah.
like physically walking that distance is why we have to actually, Arnie Ness says we can't think our way through this. We need community therapies. We need experiences. And so I heartily recommend this to anyone,
Yeah.
that you can just do it by yourself. Like
Right.
as Carrie said, um, if you go to my website, um, you'll find your way to a script that will give you all of the information that you need in order to do this for yourself.
Yeah, this is at johnseed.net.
Well, johnc.net will get you on my mailing list and give.
Okay.
It's a different link, but get in touch with me and I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, that's great because it is something we could all do. You bring a cantaloupe, or as you guys call it, a rock melon for the sun, and then you've got in your pocket little chickpeas and pinheads and different things for all the other little planets. And then you figure out how far people have to walk between, and you wait till we get to the one planet, then you announce how far the next one is, and people are like, "What?" Ah. And then they walk even farther, and then they're like, and so if you planned it right, you could also end up either looped back to where you started or just at a really interesting kind of provocative location, like we ended up at a waterfall. So yeah, I love that. And then Tema, when we were already outdoors on that workshop, we were heading back to our building on the solar system walk. We stopped and you led an exercise on breathing with trees. Could you, in just a minute or so, tell us what that's all about?
Yeah, and I just also want to say there's a lot of magic, like John said, when you get folks together with this intention.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to end at a waterfall.
Oh, you didn't?
No, it ended exactly at the waterfall. And I didn't plan to do that interbreathing with trees exercise outside. It was just as we were walking that
Oh,
John and I looked at each other like, this should happen here. So anyway, yeah, lots of magic unfolds. It's kind of a communal serendipity moment, which is so nice. So yeah, to build off of some of what John said, and to give people the larger picture too, I think so these experiential exercises, which like John said, you could do different ones, or you can make up your own. They fit into this progression of stages that help with the deepening into ecological identity, help with the paradigm shifting. And these stages start with coming from gratitude, move you through honoring our pain for the world into a stage called seeing with new and ancient eyes, which is what the inner breathing with trees exercise helps transition into. And then the final stage is going forth, where it's really an activation or an amplification of what people are already bringing into the wider world. I came up with inner breathing with trees, which I also think is just freely available on the website now, as a transition between honoring our pain for the world, which can be quite intense, and I think we'll talk about in a bit, to help people really ground into this space of seeing with new and ancient eyes, and I would say sensing probably with new and ancient sensibilities,
mm.
because it goes beyond vision. And then get into being into that space. And the experience is to help us all become much more aware of our breathing. And that every time we breathe in and out, and it's interesting to talk about this because I just want to be breathing while I'm thinking about this. We are in a cycle of regenerosity, right? Of gifting, of receiving gifts and giving gifts. This co-conspiring, as I mentioned earlier, that John and I and many people who are trying to change the systems we live by are constantly doing, is represented in the co-conspiring we're always doing, animal and plant world. We're always co-conspiring together. We're always breathing together, and that without each other, we couldn't exist for more than I don't know. I think John has the exact second count, but we would we would just fall right over, right? So inner breathing with trees is a chance through I just I kind of lead people through breathing and also read from the Handbook of Ecocultural Identity, David Abrams' chapter about inner breathing, and the fact that always, not just when we're in a beautiful rainforest, but if we're in the middle of a city in an apartment, if we're in a prison, if we are, in a classroom, wherever we are always interbreathing with the plant world and all the other animal bodies around us. And as animal bodies, we're always gifting carbon dioxide. And as plant bodies, we are always gifting oxygen. And so it's this constant movement between and among all of us that's invisible to us. I mean, it's literally invisible. That is the foundation of life, one of the foundations of life. And so getting into mindfulness about that through embodiedness about that, and grounding together in that way, it's the simplest thing, but also maybe, the simplest things are often the most profound to draw our attention to.
It really is. I liked, yeah, suddenly being aware of that exchange that it's happening all the time, but especially if you happen to stand near a tree while you're doing this, or whenever you pass a tree, if you think of that you're kind of breathing together and because of each other, there's a certain sense of connection and appreciation, which is really, I think, at the heart of the deep ecology workshops. Well, you mentioned the circle for honoring our pain, and that's the last exercise that I wanted to talk about today. It was really one of the most emotional exercises we did in the deep ecology workshop. We sat in a circle, and Erica laid out items on the floor in the middle and invited people one by one to come in and share different emotions related to our sadness and anger and fear about the world we live in. And the only response anyone in the circle was allowed to say to the participant was, "We hear you." So no commentary or judgment. John, can you tell us what the objects were on the floor and what typically happens in this circle for honoring our pain?
The exercise that we used is called the truth mandala, and this is only one of the exercises that
Okay.
could be used for honoring our pain, but it's the one that I like the best, and that's what I use always now. And this was created by Joanna Macy, and the mandala is usually it's a sacred circle divided into four or a multiple of four, and the four quadrants in the truth mandala. Uh, include a stick, a bunch of dead leaves, a rock, and an empty bowl. And the dead leaves represent sorrow, the stick represents anger, the stone represents fear, and the empty bowl represents confusion, emptiness. I don't know what to do. And we create a safe container by getting an agreement of confidentiality, not only that you won't talk about this next week, but you won't find yourself at lunchtime with someone coming up to talk to you about something that you raised in this circle. And everyone raises their hands to agree. You know that whatever comes into this circle stays in this circle. And then it's not necessary for everyone to step into the circle.
Right.
The healing takes place merely from um, being part of the container that invites these feelings and allows these feelings, because what we always find is that everybody feels the same way. Everybody's feeling the way that you are deep down, because we all live in the same world and we're all getting the same news. But as people begin to loosen up and someone starts crying and then someone raises their voice and so on, and pretty soon the kind of reticence that we all hold back, we've been
Right.
holding these things back all our lives, and it lets loose, and sometimes it's very, very noisy and
Mhm.
emotional. And always later that day, every single person is excited and animated and creative and empowered. And that's what I learned from Joanna Macy, and it's what I've found to be true ever since, that we've been taught to fear these feelings. If I were to fully feel the depth of my anguish and rage and terror about what I know is happening to my world, surely I would be crushed. No, it's not so. They're just feelings. They're just part of our humanity. They're part of our intelligence. And as long as we respect each other and hear each other, and so as each person goes back to their place after sharing, the circle says, yes, we hear you. And so these feelings aren't there to debilitate us. They're there they're part of our intelligence.
Yeah.
They're there to tell us what the next move should be. And once you've heard the feelings, it's fine to feel great, to feel uplifted, to feel elevated. They don't want to make you unhappy or depressed. They just want to make sure that you're hearing what you need to hear. Yeah.
And I was surprised in the circle for honoring our pain, or the truth mandala, by the candor and the vulnerability, like you say, and the depth that people shared of their personal experiences, including loneliness. It really brought everyone so much closer together to say things in this circle of people that you might not have even admitted to people in your own family. So it really also bonded us, and we feel like confidants as well. Plus, there was an earlier exercise where we were like looking into each other's or one person's eyes for a long time, and one where we were feeling the contours of another person's hand. So there's also a sense of intimacy that's created between people, and so that's what really made me feel like the workshop was like ecotherapy and had a psychological element to it that I don't know why I hadn't expected, but I don't have a lot of that in my life. And so that for me, it was really nice. And I definitely focused on the anger and the sadness of our political situation over here. Is so maddening to me. It was great to just go off on it, to be honest. I think this is a good place in the interview for me to just intersperse a little audio that I took during the Deep Ecology workshop that was not long after that Truth Mandala Circle of Pain that we were just talking about. I'm up at the Fern Tree Retreat Center, I think that's what it's called, somewhere in Hobart, but at this Deep Ecology conference, just a few days. It's a really immersive, wonderful, emotional experience. And we were just gathering for lunch. We made just kind of hummus and avocado veggie wraps, and just communally made and eaten. And we've just been enjoying ourselves after kind of an emotional experience, kind of sharing our grief about the environmental situation. But it's right in a beautiful neighborhood with lovely trees and mountains around. And the main birds I hear are the ravens or crows kind of squawking. You might even hear them in the background here. And it's been really fantastic. I'll probably mention on the show some of the types of exercises that you can do to feel closer to other human beings and to the earth. Yeah, just even by like looking into being told to look into someone else's eyes or listen to the pain that they experience. John Seed, who is a deep ecology father here, had said that we should, if people feel separated from the earth or think that we don't really need each other or we're not all connected, try holding your breath and imagining that, because holding your breath is the only way that you're separated, and you just can't keep doing it. And so every time we breathe, we're connected with all our ancestors and all species and the air and everything. So I thought that was actually a beautiful way to put it. And I'm looking forward to, other experiences here, and just all these people opening up and being so vulnerable. There's about 40 of us here at this retreat. Well, that earlier workshop exercise allowed us to be sad and didn't ask for us to be hopeful. The Deep Ecology workshop does end with exercises where people share their plans and get encouragement and invite others to participate. Like I invited people to be on this radio show, and you all took me up on it. So to wrap up our In Tune to Nature show in a positive way, John, what poem would you like to leave us with?
This is another of Robinson Jeffers' poems. I heartily recommend his work to everybody. He was very popular as a young man. He was on the cover of Time magazine in the 1920s, I think,
Wow.
and but he fell out of favor because he became bitter about what was happening to his beloved nature, and he was a great critic of the anthropocentrism, which is why he's a hero of the environmental movement. And this is one of his early poems called The Treasure. Mountains, a moment's earth waves rising and hollowing. The earth too is ephemeral. The stars, short-lived as grass, the stars spin in the nebulae and dry in their summer. They spiral blind up space, scattered black seeds of the future. Nothing lives long. The whole sky's recurrences tick the seconds of the hours, of the ages, of the gulf before birth, and the gulf after death is like dated. To labour 80 years in a notch of eternity is nothing too tiresome. Enormous repose after, enormous repose before, the flash of activity, the instant of life, what is called life. I fancy that silence is the thing. This noise, a found word for it. Interjection, a jump of the breath at that silence. Stars burn, grass grows, men breathe. As a man finding treasure says, "Oh, but the treasure's the essence. Before the man spoke, it was there. And after he has spoken, he gathers it. Inexhaustible treasure." Robinson Jeffers.
Oh, thank you so much, John. It really adds so much to the workshop and to this show, to have it interspersed with song and poetry and the artistic expression that's so important. And so, John or Tema, if people want to find out more about deep ecology or how to attend or host a deep ecology workshop, how can they do that? I know many of our listeners are in the United States and you all are in Australia.
Well, Joanna Macy started a big movement in the United States called the Work That Reconnects, and there, which is
Okay.
what we call experiential deep ecology in Australia. Joanna and I worked closely together, and she only died a month ago.
I'm
I'm sad to
sorry.
say.
Yeah.
So if you look up the work that reconnects, you'll find that there's people facilitating this work quite close to you, likewise in Europe and other places.
Yeah.
But many people have done this work merely through reading the book Thinking Like a Mountain,
Okay.
or um, the Deep Ecology page on my website, which we'll send you links to, and that it's not necessary even to have attended a workshop to gather a group of people together. The processes that we use are written down as in a recipe book, and you can just print them off and read them from a script, and it works just as well.
Yeah, I could imagine even people meeting up like even once a week or once a month and doing one exercise or something and then coming back together again. It's just nice as adults, I feel like to kind of, I don't know, to get into a more creative and playful and emotional place with other people and to have that permission. And so, because I know we are all also on a WhatsApp group, from our workshop, because the people we don't want to stop talking to each other. We want to keep sharing. So because of that. So I hope that this has inspired that for other people to create their own communities. Well, that's the end of our show, but I want to thank you, Mr. John Seed and Dr. Tema Milstein, for being with us on Radio Free Georgia's In Tune to Nature program. Thanks for the work you do to inspire people in Australia and around the world to see the beauty in reconnecting with nature and being loving eco-citizens on our home planet.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to In Tune to Nature, broadcasting every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, online at wrfg.org and on Atlanta radio station 89.3 FM. I record from Atlanta in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, in the Muskogee Creek territory and former range of the Red Wolf, here on planet Earth. You can access action items, news, and podcasts on the show's website, wrfg.org/intune-to-nature. The views and opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of WRFG, its board, staff, or volunteers. I'm one of those volunteers. I'm host Carrie Freeman, asking you to please support independent, non-commercial media like Radio Free Georgia. And remember to take care of yourself and others, including other species, because all of us Earthlings are related. Thank you for listening. Cheers. Let me end with a little audio I took from the Deep Ecology workshop in Tasmania. You can hear a kookaburra bird, followed by the little bell that Tema plays when it's time to come in.